The digital energy is also interesting, of course, to any investor. It changes banking, right? You know, it totally changes the way you think about banking and finance and yield. Okay, what's the property that I can trust, right? And the answer is Bitcoin. If Bitcoin is digital energy, then what's special about it is, let's take let's take a megawatt of power. If I have a megawatt of power and I sell it on a commercial grid at 11 cents a kilowatt hour, it works out to be about $1 million. That's what it's worth. Store a megawatt of power for 100 years. Can't do it.
No.
Okay, you lose 2% of the energy in the best battery every month. So your half-life of electrical energy is 3 years. You can't store it. Can you move it? 6% is the transaction fee to move it 500 miles. And you need a line, build a power line, move it 500 miles, pay 6% each time. Move it 10 times, okay, pay 60%. Move it to Tokyo, can't do it. Store it for 100 years, can't do it. What happens if I mine Bitcoin, take an S19 miner, put it on a megawatt of power, convert it to Bitcoin? I've converted electrical energy into digital energy. It's worth $4 million of Bitcoin on an S19 miner. An S19 miner will spit out about $1 million worth of Bitcoin. Now, what happens after I've digitized the energy? It'll last forever. Can I move $4 million worth of Bitcoin, move it to Tokyo? Well, 2 days ago, someone moved $2 billion of Bitcoin for like 78 cents, Rel. 78 cents to move $2 billion of digital energy anywhere on Earth. People are like, well, it's slow. Well, it takes an hour or half an hour on the main chain.
That's hardly slow.
Okay, try moving $1 billion of gold or $1 billion of electricity 10,000 miles. Yeah, okay, build yourself the pipeline to move $1 billion of natural gas 10,000 miles. Can't move it at all. Chemical energy doesn't move. We had contango in the oil market when petroleum prices went negative. Why? Because you can't store oil, right? Store $1 billion of oil as an individual. Can't do it. You can store $1 billion of Bitcoin on an Android phone that costs $50. You can move it at the speed of light. They're discovering that in El Salvador right now via the Lightning Network. We're now moving digital energy at the speed of light at a transaction cost of 1 Satoshi. 1/2000th of a cent is the price. Now, it's a big idea, but here's the idea. Humanity has advanced via harnessing chemical energy, wind energy, right? Potential energy, hydro energy, thermal energy, electrical energy, nuclear energy, and what's the end of it? Digital energy. If you convert those forms of energy into digital energy, that energy has 3 properties that are critical, and people don't get this. The first property is the digital energy has a half-life of forever. I can hold it for 100 years. Right? The second property is digital energy can be moved at anywhere on Earth for free, teleported. That's a big idea. The third idea is you can subdivide and oscillate the energy, any frequency at any scale.
But it's also the collateral thing that I've been talking about, because basically what you've got is a piece of collateral that somebody's going to want at some point. And therefore you can charge accordingly for your collateral, which you don't do with treasuries because yields actually go down when everybody wants collateral. It's kind of weird. But here you're getting the piece of collateral that somebody wants. So if somebody's in financial stress, they need something, they need the collateral, you can lend it out instantaneously anywhere in the world. And the collateral's never impaired because it's on the blockchain. It's a really fascinating concept.
It's like Tesla's concept of understand frequency. Understand frequency, and what does that mean? High frequency, high fidelity collateral, or high frequency, high fidelity energy. In this particular case, if I have $1 billion of gold, I put it in a vault. What's the monetary velocity on that? Once every decade?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't lend, I can't divide the gold into a million pieces and lend it every hour. The velocity, the best way to get velocity on gold is coin it, right? If I converted the gold into coinage and we're trading the coins, I can kind of move to a higher velocity money. Bullion is low velocity money. If I go to the fiat system with credit cards, $1 billion spent via the credit card system, it takes 30 to 60 days to settle. Right? When I give you $1,000, you have to wait 30 days before you know that the credit card company's not going to claw back the money.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit tricky as a retailer. There's a 2.5% fee every single time it changes hands, and the velocity is 5 per year. Okay. Now let's go to digital energy and the entire crypto space. You see what's going on. The velocity, the final settlement is in an hour. Well, what if the final settlement's in a second? Well, let's just keep it at an hour. Final settlement's in an hour. There's 8,700 hours in a year. So now I take my $1 billion block of energy and I subdivide it 1,000 ways and I move it back and forth every hour and I chase after the person willing to give me the highest marginal yield on the energy. And how do you do that? Well, one computer talks to 100,000 other computers 1,000 times a second, or 1,000,000 times a second while you're sleeping. And what you have is a financial system that's continually yield seeking, looking for someone that needs that loan. Maybe it's a loan for a month. It's, and you're either borrowing or you're lending, one or the other, right? I mean, I can lend it and generate yield off it, or I'm borrowing. I'm seeking the person willing to give me the lowest cost loan. If you have a certain amount of Bitcoin, let's say I have $1 million and I expect it to appreciate at 10% a year. If my expense ratio is less than my appreciation rate, I can borrow against it forever with my loan to value falling, right? My debt to equity ratio will keep falling. I can spend 5% of my money every year forever, as long as it appreciates at 6% a year, assuming I've got a bank that I trust, right? An effective banking system. So I think that this idea of digital energy is a very important one. It's an important one because it makes it the most disruptive force in the entire energy industry, right? You're converting every form of energy into digital energy, and the world's full of stranded energy. What's the problem with energy? You can't store it, right? You can't store chemical energy in the form of oil. You can't store it. You can't store wind energy. You can't store solar energy. You ever seen a solar energy battery array? Like I've seen them. I saw someone with solar power and with windmills sitting on an island in the Bahamas, and I looked at the battery array. The battery array takes up a warehouse, and you walk into it. It's all rusting. It's all going to rust within 5 years. It's a nightmare to store renewable energy, anywhere where there happens to be water vapor, and the cost is obscene. So every single form of energy, you can't store it. 1/3 of it is wasted. And so converting energy into digital energy is critical because you move it anywhere at the speed of light, it lasts forever, and you can oscillate it at any frequency, at any scale. And that means harness the value of it to a degree that is inconceivable before. The digital energy is also interesting, of course, to any investor. It changes banking, right? It totally changed the way you think about banking and finance and yield. And of course, think about a world, Raoul, where everybody's taking their excess money and they're buying. The conventional store of value for middle-class citizen is, I buy a rental home. I had a guy that worked for me, he quits my employ so he can buy 3 rental homes, rental properties, and he rents them out. Okay, well, that's fine. But on the other hand, if you had $500,000 and your choice is, I'm going to have physical property in a domicile or jurisdiction that can be impaired by circumstance, acts of God, acts of politician, It's like how you rent something in like, Eastern Virginia during a drought.
And also, anybody who's ever done that trade, and we've all done it, we've all bought places to rent out. It's a fucking nightmare. The actual effort you need to do to rent something out versus owning an asset like Bitcoin, where you virtually have no effort. The difference is extraordinary.
Bitcoin's not going to spring a leak. There's not going to be a property tax. You don't have a maintenance charge. It doesn't spring a leak. It doesn't burn down. There is no eminent domain.
You don't have to evict your tenants. Nothing.
Yeah, all sorts of things like that. It's unique, Raoul, in this respect. Property is superior to a security for so many different reasons. If you own property from a custodianship point of view, it's superior to a security. There's no way that a mayor, a senator, a congressperson is going to stand up in front of Congress and say, my Apple stock is a superior store of value to the US dollar. How many people can buy $37,000 or $37 worth of like rare art? Silver? Diamonds? Okay, what's the property that I can trust, right? And the answer is Bitcoin, because it is truly decentralized and it is homogeneous, and yet it has been anointed as property. It's a safe haven. The IRS says it's property. The SEC says it's property. And I'll make one last point, Ro. It's fungible property across time and space. For example, 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin today. And if I decompose it to 100 Bitcoin, 1 million Satoshis and put it back together again, I've still got the same thing. And at the same time, 1 Bitcoin in 10 years is going to be 1 Bitcoin. It's going to be the same quality. It's going to be 1/21 millionth of all the monetary energy in the network forever. That's not the same with your house. If you bought a lake house on Lake Tahoe, to Airbnb it out, in a decade, it may not be as high a quality as today. You have to invest huge amounts of maintenance to maintain as new. Even if you do that, it's still going to be dated in 30 years. There's no way to avoid the property. Maybe you bought the most beautiful lake house in Lake Tahoe, and in 30 years, someone builds a condo next to it because some politician rezoned the land to your left and your right, and nobody wants to stay in your lake house if it didn't sink into the water, if something else didn't happen, even if you're the perfect landlord. And so this idea that I can have a pure, pristine property in time and space that I can decompose and recompose, that I can oscillate, that I can program, this is unique in the history of the world. There's nothing comparable to this. And we have not developed this. This is property that anybody with a computer can develop. I can write a computer program to move this stuff around. Some kid in Zimbabwe can write a computer program on an Android phone that can create value from your digital energy or your digital property. They're not going to develop real estate in New York City. Nobody, and your timberland in wherever it is, Montana, is not going to get developed by some intelligent hacker in Singapore. So you're tapping into something which is incredibly powerful, inconceivable before now. Most people still they don't have their hands around it. Digital energy is the technical metaphor that says this is the technical imperative for Facebook and Google and Apple and everybody with a computer, programming capability or a CPU chip. Digital property is a macroeconomic metaphor. $100 trillion is going to flow out of real property to digital property. Digital money, that's the political metaphor. Digital money is the most controversial. I prefer to stay away from it.
Don't use the term money. It's much easier.
It torques off all the politicians and all the mainstream and everybody that doesn't understand it, and they just get all worried, it's going to topple the government or it's going to undermine the status quo. So If you leave that and you say it's digital energy, it's just energy with a half-life of 1,000,000 years that you can oscillate at 60 megahertz on a mobile phone for 8 billion people. It's digital property. It means every middle-class person can store their life savings in property and get yield on it from the highest bidder everywhere in the world every second of the day, and they don't have to stress out about the property burning down. When you understand those two things, you step back and you say, what am I going to do? And the answer is, I'm just going to own it. Just going to own it, man. Just buy it and let everybody else figure the stuff out. 100,000 entities are going to come up with a way to utilize digital energy or develop digital property. Just own it.